Hello there, class. Today is July 9th, not 8th. Let me fix that. And we are here in ENG4U to talk about short stories. So, we're finished with the reflections, right? So, as of right now, when you are watching this video, you should hopefully have handed in both your reflections, both on COVID-19 and on guns, right? Those two quick reflections should be handed in to me already, and I will be marking them and sending them back hopefully by, give me till Friday, maybe the weekend. But you're supposed to have all those done by now, and that is it for the reflection part of the course. And we are moving on to the next thing, which is short stories. So if you haven't got your reflections done yet, right, make sure you get them done as soon as possible. Remember what I said, if you had things in late, it's going to pile up because I'm not taking a break for you guys here, right? It's a 3-week course. We're going to hit the accelerator. So, yeah, short stories are the next thing. So we're going to be doing short stories for a couple of different reasons. We're looking to boost our critical thinking skills, our analytical skills by looking at these texts. And one of the main things we're going to sort of emphasize in these short stories is reading between the lines, analyzing text, and figuring out things like symbolism. Okay, so that's what we will be doing with these short stories. You're going to get 4 in all, right? So first one started today, and then another one on Friday, another one on Monday, and another one on Tuesday. Sorry, I just need a drink. Anyway, so we are going to dive straight into that, right? So in order to access my short stories, right, you just go to the website, you click here on content, and you're going to see number 3 here, short stories, right, and you see 3 short stories. I've already put them up. Our first one's going to be happy endings, right, so you just click on that, and it will take you straight to happy endings there, right? And tomorrow's short story, I've already posted all of them. Why is gravel there? Okay, I'll fix that in a moment. But I've already posted the first 3, right? And you can take a look at them all, right? So if you want to read them in advance, I'm not going to post the questions in advance, though. So, uh, again, what we're really going to be trying to do is look at fine details in our short stories. I'm going to be pushing you guys to try to be creative and everything like that. But before I start talking about happy endings, in terms of what is going to happen, sorry, uh, each of these short stories, after you're finished reading it, you're going to have to answer a sort of big question, right? This is question. It won't be as long as a reflection. Your answer is going to be about 5 to 7 sentences long. But essentially, I'm going to be asking you a big question about these short stories, or at least the first 3. The fourth one, you're going to write an essay about, so it's a little different. But for the first 3, you're going to just be answering these big question, and these are all going to be reading marks. Sorry, it's really hot today. So what that means for you guys is that basically for the next 3 classes, it's going to be short story posted. You read the story and you answer that big question. All right. So this is done, by the way, in place of a test, right? So if we were all together in the same room, right, what I would do is I'd give you these short stories to read and say, okay, the test is on Monday, right, or something like that. Obviously, we can't really do that here. So instead, right, instead of getting a test, right, you're just getting these sort of reaction questions. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at our first short story. So, our first story is Happy Endings, which is written by a woman called Margaret Atwood. If you haven't heard that name before, Margaret Atwood, she is one of Canada's most famous authors, right? Probably one of the two most famous authors that we have here in the country. And she's gotten a little bit more famous worldwide lately because right now there's a Netflix series called The Handmaid's Tale, which is based on one of her books. Right, so she has sort of gained international fame. I mean, she was famous before, but now her famousness has like increased in the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years. And she's written a whole lot of books, a lot of other books too, right? So she is sort of Canada has two super famous authors, right? One is Alice Munro, who's going to be the author of the essay or the story that you'll write an essay about, and the other is this lady Margaret Atwood. So she is sort of one of our two, I guess you could say, most famous authors here in the country. Anyway, so this story by her, right, Happy Endings, is you're going to rapidly find kind of unusual, not your typical story here at all. So what it is it's multiple choice, right? You're going to read the story and you're going to find that, well, it starts with this, right? John and Mary meet. What happens next? If you want a happy ending, try A. Right? And A is John and Mary fall in love and get married. They both have worthwhile and remunerative jobs, which they find stimulating and challenging. They buy a charming house. Real estate values go up. Eventually, when they can afford, live, and help, they have two children to whom they are devoted. The children turn out well. John and Mary have a stimulating and challenging sex life and are worthwhile friends. They go on fun vacations together, they retire, they have hobbies which they find stimulating and challenging. Eventually they die. This is the end of the story, right? So that's ending A, right? So you've got an A over there, right? That's your first choice. But then you'll see ending B is Mary falls in love with John, but John doesn't fall in love with Mary. He merely uses her body for selfish pleasure and ego gratification of a tepid kind, right? So then the second right ending is a totally different story, right? But what you'll find as you go along, right, is that some of these stories actually weave together, right? There's actually, something that'll happen to John that will affect what in ending B that affects what happens in ending C, right? So what this is it's a very unusual sort of story, right? So the way you guys may have been taught about short stories in the past is probably something like this. So, in previous classes, you may have seen this thing before, right? This is called the plot graph, right? Where it sort of maps out the way a short story is meant to go, right? It's supposed to start with exposition, where, you are introduced to the protagonist and the setting and all of that stuff. Then you've got rising action, where the conflict starts to sort of be established, and then you've got a climax where the conflict is solved one way or the other, and then after that it's falling action where you see what happens after the climax, and then it's resolution where you sort of find out what happens at the end of the story and indeed after the story. So that's sort of the traditional way of teaching short stories, that short stories follow this graph, right, and everything like that. But for this thing, what you'll find when you read it is that it does not follow the graph because, well, it's multiple choice, right? It's saying, this is ending A, this is ending B, this is ending C, right? And it goes all the way up to F, right? So there are 6 different endings in the story. So, well, how is it following the plot graph? And the answer is it isn't. So this makes it a little different from some of the stories you may have gotten in previous classes, and it all comes down to this word, which we're going to be talking about a fair bit here in this class, of postmodernism. So, postmodernism are stories and artworks that are suspicious or distrustful of so-called normal kinds of art, and that try instead to critique normal kinds of stories or art by parodying them. So postmodernism is basically ideology or a sort of philosophy that is all about sort of breaking rules, breaking norms, right? So instead of telling the story that sort of can go on the graph, right? Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, right? Instead of doing all that, right? Margaret Atwood says, no, I'm not going to do that at all. Instead of, having a conflict, I'm going to do this weird multiple choice short stories, right? So it's these are stories that try to be different in order to make a point, right? So it's a genre, I guess you could say, that's very heavy on irony, right? And it's very, I guess you could say, subversive, right? And you're going to see that not just in this class, but also in university, because postmodernism is very much in favor in universities, right? If you ever take any kind of English literature studies course at university, I know most of you probably won't, but if you do, right, you might have to take at least one, by the way. You're going to find postmodernism coming out of, well, all the walls there, right? So postmodernism is a very sort of common philosophy in university, and it is like a sort of interesting way of looking or making stories, right? So I want you guys to read the story. It's not too long. It's like 3 pages or something, so that's not longer. They will get longer, right? The last one's going to be 12 pages, so I don't want to hear anyone complain about length, by the way, because, it's summer school, and you guys are supposed to be doing like 3 days worth of work in one day, so if you're going to come to the Q&A session today and say, hey, it's too long, then no, I don't want to hear it, right? You got to read it. So, that aside, I want you guys to read this, right? And, take a look at it. And I have a cat just making chaos everywhere right now. So, I want you guys to read it and take a look at it. And, you know, first of all, just get that basic understanding of it. If there's one tip that I can give you for reading this story, and indeed most postmodern stories, not all of them, but most of them, is that you should know 4 happy endings, right? Let me put it right here so it's nice and clear. It's supposed to be funny, right? That's a sort of thing with most postmodern stories. Not all postmodern stories are going for the humor, right? But this thing here, right, is trying to make a joke with all of these endings here and different things, right? So that is one thing, right? So I can tell you, this is one of those stories where if you laugh while you are reading this thing, then chances are you are on the right track. Once you've finished reading the story, what I would like you to do is answer a simple question, which you will find in the assignments tab, right? You'll click on assignments just like you did for reflections, right? And you'll click on happy endings right here. And you will submit it just like you normally do. Uh, so the question I have asked, let me make it nice and big right here. There we go. It's 24 font. Is what is the overarching point that Margaret Atwood was trying to make in Happy Endings? Or in other words, what exactly is going on in the story, and what is the author trying to say? So, this is an unorthodox story, right? It's not just about, two characters go and fall in love, right? It's two characters, and then more characters, and then everything like that. So, my question here sort of is, what is the point here? Now, in order to answer this question, I think what's important is to think a lot about the last 2 sentences, or perhaps 3 paragraphs of the story, right? Where, as you'll see when you read it, Margaret Atwood ends the story by saying, now try how and why, right? Once you can understand that last sentence, you will be able to answer this question. But again, I want to hear sort of your take on this story, which is unusual and hopefully kind of amusing. And you're going to answer that in about 5 to 7 sentences. All right? And that should be submitted by tonight, because as you'll find, tomorrow we'll have a different story, and you'll have to do this again for that particular story. So, you want to make sure you can stay on top of things in that way. So, that's what's due tonight. Now, for tomorrow, we're going to be having our first seminar. So tomorrow, we're going to have our first seminar. It will take place from 2 to 3 o'clock, right? So instead of my Q&A time, right, we'll be doing a seminar. Topics to be discussed include masks, as in face masks, like you did for your first reflection, and we'll also be talking about the assault rifle ban, which you did for your second reflection, and time permitting, we can talk about happy endings too, but I'm probably going to leave most of that until next week's seminar. So these seminars are different from the Q&As. The Q&As, you come, you drop by, you say something, you ask me questions, and it's fine, it's casual. These, though, are a bit more formal. There's going to be a participation mark attached to it, so attendance is mandatory for these, and you need to show up ready to talk about these things, right? So I'll be asking questions, like basically the reflection question, right? Do you think we should have masks, right? And it's not an oral presentation like you would do in front of the class, right? I'm not going to say, okay, now you talk, now you talk, now you talk. What I'm going to ask is that people state their positions, right? And, one student might say, well, I think masks are very important, and, we should have a $50 fine for anyone found without a mask. And the next person might say, no, masks should be up to the person who is wearing them or doesn't want to wear them, right? So it's sort of like a roundtable discussion. I don't want to say debate because it's not that formal. It's meant to be an organic sort of dialogue, right? So you show up and you give basically your opinion on these issues, and that will lead to a participation mark for you guys. So that's the idea of these seminars. So the first one will be from 2 to 3 p.m., right? It'll be right in the virtual classroom like normal. And, don't just show up and, be on the list and don't say anything for the whole thing, right? Talk, right? If your microphone has problems, you can at the very least type, right? That would at least be better than nothing. So, be there tomorrow for the seminar, and we'll talk about some of these issues. And of course, if you have any questions for me today for happy endings, as usual, will be in the virtual classroom from 2 to 3 p.m. ready to answer any question you might have. So I think that's it for today from me. And for now, I will say thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.